Hello, folks. Welcome to Rational Science. We have a great day today, and we're the only site on the internet that does physics. Everybody else does mathematics. What they do is move concepts around, mathematical concepts. We do physics. We do explanations, not descriptions. We also do extinction, saying that we're the last generation of humans on Earth. And why don't we start there? Let's start with extinction today, as we usually do. I'm going to start by saying that today I got my first shot, my first vaccine of COVID early at noon. And I got it because they put a gun to my head. Okay? A couple months back, I went to Iceland to visit my son. We went with my wife and we celebrated 45 years of marriage. Happy marriage. Not too many people get married these days, so they probably don't know what that means. Um, and they put me in prison. I was in jail for 5 days. They put me in a hotel under quarantine and fed me, but I couldn't get out. And the 3 times I had to have the test mouth. They go all the way to your throat and up your nose. Leaving Frankfurt, arriving Reykjavik. When I got there, they did the test. When I got out, they did the test, and they did another test in between. So I had really 4 tests. Not very friendly test. And in a couple months, I'm going to be going to a country that is a higher risk. So I just don't want to, I want to avoid the hassle. That's what it is. And so just get the stupid vaccine. I don't know what poison they put in my arm. Just get it over with and go on. Now, do I care about this COVID thing? Am I scared that I might get, the disease or whatever? For me, it's been a non-issue for the last year and a half. That thing's been around. I don't care about it at all. I don't read about it. The only thing that concerns me about the COVID is the economic effect. You know, the the consequences of the economic measures, the draconian measures that the politicians are taking. That I'm concerned about. Other than that, I don't care. I don't know anything about this COVID. Now, do I believe that there's a disease out there that's killing people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, the answer is I don't know. I don't know. First, I don't read much about it. Okay, I don't care about it. It's not an issue for me. The only thing I can reason about it is that you have countries like Cuba, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. They seem to have problems as well, and I don't think they're going to work for the U.S. companies, the big corporations. Okay, I don't think they're all in cahoots with this. No, I think there must be some problem if all these countries, which are enemies, are having a problem, within their countries. On the other hand, you have this issue where you have these big corporations making a lot of money with this vaccine or these vaccines. They've got many of them out there. You have a political issue, for example, here in Europe, the Sputnik, I call it the Sputin, Sputin. The Sputin vaccine is not allowed. It's not approved. And you would think that, if you're just trying to save lives, if this is a health issue, you know, whoever comes with a vaccine, hey, you're welcome. Please come in and do whatever you have to save our population. And when they go in there and they say, look, we're not going to accept yours, we're going to accept ours, they don't care about health. They're doing politics. And so the question is, you look at these things, companies making money, you've got this politics in there where they say, we're not going to accept your vaccine, we'd rather have ours because we're making money off of it, and we don't want to give you money. Then it's not a health issue. It's a political issue. And so I can understand why a lot of people have doubts out there about, this whole COVID issue. What is it? It's an issue of information. And right now, I don't have the information, all the information I need to tell you one way or the other. And again, for me, it's a non-issue. Talking about information, we have a little incident that happened that not most of you are aware of. Most of you are not aware of, okay? And that's that they overthrew the government of Afghanistan. Some hillbillies, Arab hillbillies, they came down and took over the government, kicked the United States military out of there, or forced them out, you could say. Is it because I'm going to talk about politics or military issues? No, I don't care about those at all. I do care about economics, but in this case, I care about another issue, which I want to raise in relation to extinction. Okay, and it's got to do with this little picture here. Put it on Facebook, and here you see them. People rushing to the airport, trying to get out of the country. Probably middle class to upper middle class, rich people. Those are the people that are in that C-17 airplane. Others are clinging from the paint of the airplane, of the C-17, trying to get out of there. And why am I raising this? I'm saying we got two issues here. And the first one is the United States is is the last empire. There's not going to be another empire after the United States. There won't be a Chinese, a Russian, a South American, and African empire. No, the United States is the last empire. And what I mean by that is if the United States, not if, let's say when the United States economy collapses, that's the end of it for the world. That's the end of man, essentially. Okay? And it's not too far away. And so right now, I think that whether you like the United States government, whether you hate it, is irrelevant. Right now, we have to help the United States government, not economy, right, fall apart, okay, disintegrate. That's the first issue. The other issue has got to do with this. These people rush to the airport at the last moment. And you might ask, well, why didn't they rush a month ago? Why didn't they leave 3 months ago? Why didn't they leave a year ago? And the answer is information. Misinformation, disinformation. How's that? I mean, here you have the president of Afghanistan telling his people on the last day saying, folks, we got to defend Kabul. It's not going to fall. We got all the military there, everything in place to fight these hillbillies coming from the mountains. We're going to defend our government. And after he talks, the first thing he does, he gets on an airplane and gets out of the country. I love that. He needs, what are you going to give him? A Purple Heart, an Iron Cross for bravery? Yeah, he's going to defend Kabul from the United Arab Emirates. Yeah, great. Disinformation. He tells people, stay there, fight, and he leaves. And so why am I bringing this up? Well, a lot of people really don't believe. It's not a question of belief, it's a question of understanding. A lot of people don't understand the mass extinction theory that I'm proposing. Okay? Part of that mass extinction theory has to do with timing, with how much time we have, which is what people want to know. That's a key issue. People say, when is it going to happen? And well, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not an astrologer. I can't tell you that. Okay? So the issue is, if you understand the theory, you might do something about it. You might take some kind of precaution or prepare in some way if you understand the theory and realize that it's going to come very soon. But 90% of the people probably don't even understand the theory. Out of the 10 remaining percent, maybe 9% don't believe it's going to happen in a very short time, that it's imminent. Okay? They don't think it's imminent, and so they don't take any precaution. They think it might happen, and it might happen in 500 years, so I don't have anything to worry about. It's not going to be on my watch, so nobody worries about it. And they're going to end up like these Afghanis. You know, they're going to be hanging onto the paint of the airplane when the global economy collapses, because it's going to be very sudden. It's going to not give you time to react or to prepare. Okay, so this is the issue. And see, if you knew in advance what the theory is about, if you have an understanding of the theory and realize that it's going to happen quite soon within your lifetime, you might make preparations. Otherwise, you don't. Okay, so it's imagine Jesus. I'm Jesus Christ. Okay, I come over here and I wave my hand and say, "Believe in me, you will be saved. You will go to heaven." Okay, I'm the Savior. But if you don't believe, not in me, in the theory, if you don't understand the theory, if you don't think it's going to happen very soon, well, then you don't take any measures. Okay, so it's more or less like that. And some people have told me, said, let's put it this way, I don't want to live in a world without love. You know, if everybody's gone, do you want to be the last human on earth? Do you want to live alone, just pondering, that humanity's not around you anymore and that there's going to be no future for the world and you're just one of the last or maybe the last person on earth? And some people say, I don't want to be that person. I'd rather die, commit suicide or whatever. Well, that's a decision you don't want to take today. That's my answer to that. See, all these people, they thought they were going to fight Kabulians. They thought they were going to fight, maybe they thought their city would be defended, etc., etc. And when the time came, they all rushed to the airport. So at first they didn't take the decision. When they took the decision, it was too late. And that's more or less the situation with the collapse of the global economy. It's going to be very fast, maybe in a matter of a couple of weeks or whatever. And then when you rush to do something about it, it's too late. And you say, why didn't I think of that? Why did, and you might say, I don't want to commit suicide. I want to live. So it's too late to make that decision. So don't make it today. Make it the day that it happens. Okay, that's when you decide whether you want to live or not. Okay, so just keep all that in mind. Okay, so here we have an idea of why we're not going to last very long. Okay, and again, it's got to do with the U.S. economy. Here's an analysis that came out this week, and the first, the individual, he's some kind of an expert on economics. You can find his article out there. So the U.S. economy has bounced back with a lot of consumption. Consumption, right? A lot of that consumption is going to China. It's one of the reasons China has such a strong economy. What we're seeing is the United States is starting to fall behind in economic growth. Okay, I've been trying to tell people that, but they don't believe it. Well, here's a guy who at least is on the right track as far as I'm concerned. U.S. growing debt like crazy. We have debt to GDP that is fueling the majority of our so-called economic growth. Is that growth? We'll find out. So is it really economic growth when you borrow money or print money, send checks to people who turn around and buy goods on Amazon, and these goods come in from China? Okay, you see where this guy is headed with all this, okay? Okay, he goes in here. Let me see if we put it on this side. It says GDP is 70% consumption. Talking about U.S. GDP, right? Gross domestic product, by the way. And as the economy has rebounded back on a GDP basis, it's done so with a tremendous increase in a trade deficit. Multiple percentage points of GDP have come from an increase in the trade deficit, and that's not real GDP. Okay? Consumption is not really the economy. The economy is about what? Production, not consumption. Okay? Using money to buy stuff. I'll give you an example, and that's Spain in the both 17th and 18th century. That's when their empire, remember Spain was a big empire. It had a naval, the fleet, the naval fleet. They conquered South America, et cetera, et cetera. It was big. And then they started to fall apart. Why? Because one of the reasons, okay, they got all this gold from the Americas, gold and silver, and instead of putting factories, building something with that, what they did, they used the money, especially the rich people who got all that money. They used the money to buy stuff from where? From Holland, from England, from France. And so what they did was stimulate the economies of those countries up north. And today, well, we know the results. Spain ended up being a poor country. Just now, it's coming back up a little bit, okay? But until the 19th century, Spain was nothing. It fell apart completely, more or less like the Ottoman Empire, again, buying stuff, being consumers and not producers. Okay, and that's what this is more or less about. And when you buy goods produced in Asia with stimulus money, okay, it shows up as GDP. But it's really Asian GDP. It's consumption in the United States. With 5 million fewer jobs because of the COVID, lots of them in tourism, right? It shows up mathematically in the productivity equation, but it's really Chinese productivity. Because if you just consume goods, you're not really having economic growth, okay? So keep this in mind. You can't become a consumer country. You have to be a producing country. Producers is what creates GDP, not consumption. Okay, and that's what this fellow is arguing. It says we are looking at a roadmap that is clearly headed towards the U.S. dollar losing its sole reserve currency status. Remember, the dollar is the currency of the world, more or less, here and there, and it might lose that status. That's what this fellow is saying. The dollar has been in a series of declining highs for decades. It goes back to the 80s. For that reason, I think when we get to the next break to the lower level, the dollar is going to go past the most recent low of around 80 and even take out the low of 70. So I think there is easily 25% downside in the US dollar. Okay, so yeah, I'm saying that the dollar is going to lose value and money is going to have no value at some point. Nobody's going to want to accept it. Can you imagine no one accepting the dollar, not even God? You go to heaven and you want to buy your way in there and they say, well, no, we're not going to allow that. Okay, we don't want your money. Okay, so here's the notion for post-stimulus, what we can expect in the near future once they lift all these restrictions, okay, after my vaccine. Almost any profession you ask, they say they have a hard time getting workers, okay? Well, no surprise. People are making more money or the same amount of money by not working. Okay, well, we're all more or less in tune with that. We know what's going on out there. So what will happen when these stimulus programs ultimately end or people actually have to start paying for their rent? Okay, and so he says there's going to be tremendous economic disruption. Okay, people are relying on stimulus. And the stimulus is responsible completely for this economic growth. Okay, so what's going to happen after the stimulus stops? Will people go back to work? Will they want to work? I mean, they got used to the easy money. They say, hey, I kind of like that. It was like retirement. I had all this time on my hand. Government sending me the check. I'm consuming stuff that's made in China. Okay, something is wrong, folks, and I'm not sure the United States can come out of that so easily. Okay, and again, if the U.S. economy falls apart, China is not going to replace it, because if the U.S. dollar, for example, or the economy goes to pieces, Europe goes to pieces, and China will have no one to sell to, so China won't grow either. And militarily, I don't think China will, the U.S. will not allow the Chinese to, match them militarily. So there's going to be a problem in the world. And that's just coming up, maybe 5-6 years at the most. Okay, so once again, all I can urge you is to think about these things. Think that at least it might happen. and to take whatever measures you can. You don't want to be rushing to the airport at the last moment, okay, like the Kabulians. Okay, here's another bit of information. It says Social Security could be insolvent within 8 years. Note came out today. Okay, and so for those of you who are in your 20s and 30s, whatever, maybe you think you're going to get some Social Security, retirement money. I would say think again. I don't think it's going to happen. Not for you guys. Okay. Okay, here's another bit of data came out today also, or I think yesterday. Data from the 2020 census released earlier this month shows that the United States has become significantly more urban in the past 10 years. And I've been saying that for a while now that, urbanization is taking place. There's this transition from the country to the city, not only in the United States, the entire planet. You choose the country. You choose the country, everybody's moving from the country to the cities, from the farmlands to the cities. The farmlands are falling into the hands of big corporations, agricultural corporations, which mass produce the food and feed the cities. That's the way it's working. Can this process continue endlessly to the point where everybody's in the cities and the countryside is only in the hands of the big corporations? So the more this transition proceeds, the more people are squashed into the cities, the fewer people they're going to have because in the cities you can't have children, and so you have that situation where population doesn't grow because you have everybody concentrated in the cities. In the cities, the dollar is falling, the euro is falling, the money is becoming worth less, not worthless, but it's worth less, okay? And at some point, you can't even reach the end of the month, or barely. There's no disposable income. That's got to have an effect on the companies that produce goods and services. And it's all intertwined, okay? And we cannot escape this process. There's nothing we can do. Intelligence cannot overcome this. Technology cannot overcome this. The fact that we can foresee events, we can't do anything about this. Okay? So, it says the population in the U.S. is being increasingly concentrated in cities. So we have all these things going on, okay? This is what the density map looks like of the United States. You can see that it's not evenly spread out. You can say that just about any country in the world. But what's important about this is that no new cities will be founded. We will not create new cities in Russia, in Japan, in China. No new cities. Okay, this is the issue. So all these countries that, whatever city you see on the planet today, essentially those will become bigger. Everybody will simply rush to the cities from the countryside, to existing cities. There's no way you can create a new city. We're not in the age of colonization anymore. Okay? So whatever cities you see on the planet today, that's what man dies with, essentially. Maybe one city here or there might be founded. You might find an example out there. I can give you a couple examples of that. Not really founding new cities, but enlarging little villages and turning them into more than towns and cities. One was where I spent my prison term in Eloy. Eloy, if you look at the city of Eloy, it was nothing until the 1990s. Then they built the prison. And suddenly, all these services started coming around the prison system, the federal prison that was there. Same thing happened, you can look it up, to this city where Florence in Colorado, where they have the ADX, the most maximum security prison in the world. It's built underground so that you cannot escape. Again, a city that grew with the prison system. And that's another reason that the United States does not like to legalize drugs, because it uses that. Remember, most of the people who go to prison today, maybe up to 85%, I would think, judging by what I saw, are in there for drugs. And so imagine if they were to legalize all drugs. Well, then they would get rid of the entire prison system. Okay, there would be any prisons. And what if we do it in reverse? What if we raise the penalties um, to those who deal with drugs, who traffic with drugs? Well, then you need prisons. And you put a prison, and around that prison, all these services pop up out of nowhere. So one way to found cities today is through prisons. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say here. Okay, but you can't do that all over the world, and it's not really going to create a population boom. It's just a little drop of water in the ocean, essentially. Okay, so yeah, we're going to die with the cities we have on the planet today. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the things I look at or think about when I'm looking at the global economic collapse, specifically the United States economic collapse. I look at inflation, decline in real wages, okay, are real wages maintained, the debt to GDP ratio, stock market crash, or, is there going to be a stock market crash? Will it be the last one, the next one we have? Will it be the next to the last one? These are the issues I look at. Cryptocurrency volatility, lots of cryptocurrency lately. New business, people are at home, they receive these government checks. They have $100 maybe here and there, and they say, I'm at home, this is so easy. I just open an account and invest in cryptocurrencies. And essentially it's gambling. Okay, it's gambling from home. You don't have to go to Las Vegas or what is it? Atlantic City. You don't pull on the one-armed bandits anymore. What you do is you play the stock market, play from home. Okay, so a lot of people getting into that, especially with the money that the government gives them. Not very good because it's totally unproductive stuff again. Okay, unemployment. I look at that. Protests and riots. You got to look at how many riots we're having now lately in many countries. Okay, that's another thing in the barometer that I look at. Condition out there of the socio-political state of mind. People want to go out there and protest for whatever because they're not very happy with many things. Okay, so the more of those that we have, it's a signal, it's a clue that something is not right. Okay, disinformation, tremendous disinformation. We had all the information we needed. We could probably, if you had all the information you needed to make a decision on whether there's going to be a global collapse, economic collapse, or even a collapse of the U.S. economy, then maybe you would act differently. But you don't have all that information at your fingertips, and a lot of that information is disinformation. Do you think the government's ever, any government for that matter, is going to tell you, panic, panic, the world's coming to an end, we have no solutions to our economic problem? Do you think a government would say that? No, they say exactly the opposite. They'll always tell you the opposite. Everything's okay, folks, go back to work, we're doing fine, we're going to get out of this mess. That's what they tell you. And so they blindside you to the realities, okay? And it's going to happen like the people, like the Kabulians. They were blindsided to what was really going on. You had the United States and the Taliban, they had meetings behind essentially a secret meeting or behind the backs of the government of Afghanistan. They reached a deal there. And I'm sure a lot of people in Afghanistan did not hear about any of that. And so they were comfy at home saying, well, everything's going to be all right. And everything wasn't all right because they lacked the information. And the same thing with if there's going to be an economic collapse, the government will not inform you that there is going to be an economic collapse. They're not going to tell you, look, the dollar's on its way down, we can't do anything about it. All you have is private people like this gentleman who I quoted just a minute ago. They'll tell you. But, some people believe him, other people believe others. Some people are bearish, other people are bullish, So you got all kinds of people out there. And so, people are not aware of the reality, okay, or the realities, okay? And yeah, I look at also Chinese economic growth. Is China growing? And what I say there in the case of China is that China used to grow at a much higher rate. It was growing like when Deng Xiaoping took over the government, it was growing at like 25% and annually, and now it's down to 6, 5 maybe, and that's if you believe the Chinese numbers. Okay, again, you got to be careful with the disinformation. Very important point, because based on that, you take your decisions and you have your beliefs. And you got to be very careful about what information you have out there today. Okay, so just be on your toes. Okay, one fellow says, economic collapse has a cause, and it isn't because a species disappears because it is too old. Well, he's got it wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that economic collapse has anything to do with species being old. So, one more time, I want to get this straight. Here you have it. Mass extinction has to do with economic collapse. It's got to do with the overturning of what? Of the ecological pyramid. Background extinction that's where the species ages. And aging is what? Overturning of the population pyramid, not ecological pyramid, but the population pyramid, and the loss of genetic diversity. Okay? So I just want to make sure people understand what the theories are. Okay, the theories are mass extinction has to do with food, with economic collapse, and background extinction, which is the extinction of a single species, that has to do with the aging of the species, meaning population pyramid overturn and genetic loss of genetic diversity. Okay, so at least get the theory right. Okay, it doesn't mean you're going to believe in it. It means that you got to get it right so you understand what I'm saying here. Okay. Okay, another fellow says that all these mass extinctions happen because of catastrophic events, which is the party line. It's what all paleontologists out there essentially believe. Okay, it says historical context indicates cataclysm as one of those environmental changes that cause extinctions. Yeah, historical, no. That's the paleontology world believes that you can only produce mass extinctions through cataclysms or catastrophic acts of God. Okay, large bolides, tectonic and volcanic, etc., and the geologically obvious worldwide flooding events. Have no idea what he's talking about. Maybe he thinks all this has to do with the Bible, biblical flood. I have no idea what this fellow could be referring about worldwide floods. I mean, floods never killed a single species. So I'm not sure what he's talking about when he says floods. And I don't think there's any paleontologist that talks about the flooding of the world. Okay, so I don't know where he got that. Okay, but this is my take on this, and that's that catastrophic or catastrophes never cause a single extinction. Catastrophes have nothing to do with extinction. Nothing at all. So you have the Ordovician. One of the theories, a prominent theory, is that a supernova nearby caused there was a gamma ray burst, and apparently one of the theories, because there's sub-theories there, one of the theories is knock the air out of the earth. Like what is it, foghorn leghorn? You hit him in the stomach and all his feathers come out of him and then come back. And that's more or less what these people are saying. They're saying, the zap, the gamma ray burst, hit the earth, knocked the air out of the earth, killed all the animals that had to die, and then the air came back. That's one of the theories. Okay, and who's behind this? NASA. Why? Because NASA wants you to believe that all catastrophic theories are true, and they have to do with extraterrestrial impacts or causes. Okay. Permian, there's a couple theories there. One is that you have volcanic activity. Another one is that you have methane sprouting out of the seabeds, filled the earth, created this winter, this cloud that prevented sunlight from reaching the plants. So the plants die, the herbivores die, the carnivores die. Yeah, the only problem with all these theories, including the Cretaceous one, which is the asteroid impact, is that they cannot explain selectivity. The only thing that an extinction theory has to explain. And the way they do it, they have an ad hoc sub-theory for every different types of animals. How did the flying reptiles die? Well, they got hit with all these burning stones, these hot stones that came from the explosion. How did the animals in the sea die? Well, it turns out that the asteroid fell on a pile of sulfur, and that sulfur acidified the water. Some animals could take it, some could not, and those that could not died. And they have all these sub-theories to explain how this guy died, not this other guy died. And they cannot explain even with that. No catastrophe ever caused a single extinction. Okay, Mother Nature doesn't use catastrophes to do extinction. The way Mother Nature does it is the natural way. What she does is she goes in there and she says, "Look, we're going to deprive you of food. Now, if you're deprived of food, will you die?" And I think the answer is yes. I mean, you might think that you might live, but no. If I deprive you of food, at least for a year, I think you will die for sure. And if we deprive any animal, even plants for that matter, of food for at least a year, that animal will die. And so at least we have a mechanism we can all understand. No food, you die, period, we're done. Now the question is that how Mother Nature works? Yeah. If the food source, in this case the plants that live for millions of years, disappear because they go through their population pyramid overturn, they've been around for too long, they lost their genetic diversity, the plants are no longer there, the ones that the herbivores depended on and established a long-term relation with, yeah, those animals will die, and the carnivores that depended on them will go with them. Meanwhile, while other plants are expanding at the expense of those plants, and you have these little animals that depend on those plants, those thrive. And those become the next generation of plants and animals that dominate the planet, the landscape. So that's a more rational theory than saying that, an asteroid hit the Earth, or that you have a supernova with gamma rays that bombarded the Earth. That only gives job security to NASA, okay? And they do have a special interest in that. That's why they use those funds to fund university researches that highlight extraterrestrial causes. Okay. Here we have another issue. Fellow says, I thought the more evolved, the less genetic diversity. Yeah, that's true. And that's what my graph showed. Here's the graph again from my book. Okay, the more you go forward in time, the more that the animal is evolved and the less genetic diversity there is. Okay, so that is what I'm saying. So I'm not sure what this fellow understood, if he's questioning. He's putting it in a negative way, like if that's not what I said. Yeah, that is what I said. Okay, that the more evolved the species, the less genetic diversity. And today, we have very little genetic diversity among humans. Okay, and part of that, the reason for that, is that we've been inbreeding for so long. We don't breed with gorillas or chimps, which are our closest relatives today. The last time we could have bred with someone was probably Neanderthal or maybe Florensis or one of those cousins. And no, we just bred within ourselves, and today we're washed out. That's what it is. Okay, so what little mutations we collect year after year from one generation to the other is knocked down through completely through through bottlenecks, usually diseases, wars, so on, that wipe out suddenly big chunks of our population, and then we have a smaller founders effect. We have streamlined our genetics, and now we start all over again with fewer people. And if you do this over and over again, that defeats any little mutations that you collect day after day from one generation to the next. So no, in the end, we lose genetic diversity. Any species loses genetic diversity, okay, usually through disease. Okay, another issue. Fellow says, anyone who claims genetic diversity increases by inbreeding obviously hasn't raised dogs or other domestic animals. Look up animal husbandry, folks. And yeah, if you go to that site that he points out there, you'll see what the issue is. And they write the following. It says, the Canine Diversity Project is an attempt to acquaint breeders of domesticated dogs with the dangers of inbreeding and the overuse of popular sires. Okay? Both lead to the indiscriminate what? Loss of genetic diversity. Okay? You can't inbreed because inbreeding results in loss of genetic diversity. And people don't all understand that, especially people who are geneticists. They don't understand that. They think we increase genetic diversity because we have all these mutations from one generation to the next. And it's like they don't understand that a species, any species, can only lose genetic diversity over thousands of years. Essentially, you can lose. You're going to win a little bit here, and then you lose because of bottleneck and founder's effect. You win a little through mutation, you lose a lot through bottlenecks and founder's effect. And so, yeah, no geneticist has figured that out to this day. Another issue fellow raises says, I thought modern plumbing was the cause of conquering most disease, along with food standards and things like that. Yeah, I agree. That is true, as far as I'm concerned, at least. If you look at especially the history of England in the 19th century, one of the things that preserved the population, why so many children were dying at the beginning of that century and very few died towards the end of this century, or a lot less, was the sanitary conditions. They cleaned the Thames, the river, and they started vaccinating people, if that helps. Maybe by then we had already collected quite a bit of defenses against common diseases, childhood diseases. And so, at some point, those diseases do not kill. They're endemic, but we survive them. Child gets sick but doesn't die. Okay, and once he doesn't die, he passes those beneficial genes to the next generation. Okay, so that's the theory. Whether you believe it or not, that's a separate issue, but that is the theory. Okay, another fellow raises an issue, says, we should segregate groups of people in strongly divergent artificial environments where the original genetics and the new mutations will be selected differently with enforced fertility and child health care. Create novel and populous populations, species of man. That's been proposed by many people in the past, politicians, etc. First of all, that's politics. I don't do politics. In other words, I don't do recommendations in the sense, this is what you should do or any of that. I don't care about that at all. I try to explain causes and mechanisms. And so what we should do is not part of this channel. That's up to every person to decide what they should do. All we can do is present our case, theories, or whatever. Now, this thing about selecting, doing artificial insemination and preferential insemination, I don't think you're going to create a new species anyways. Or all you're going to do is what this other fellow said about dogs. All you're going to be doing is perpetuating inbreeding. And inbreeding is what? Loss of genetic diversity. So all you're doing is guaranteeing that we're going to die, maybe sooner than later. Okay? But again, humans will not die because of loss of genetic diversity. I want to make that absolutely clear. People are confused about that, about this channel. No, we're going to die in a mass extinction. That's got to do with food. It's got to do with economic collapse. Okay, nothing to do with. I can't say nothing to do with aging. It does have to do with aging in the sense that our economics depends on demand, and demand is a function of population. And if the population doesn't grow, it does affect our economics, only in that sense. Okay. Other than that, we're going to die because of economics. And what do I mean by that? I'm saying that money will be no more. We won't believe in money. We won't accept money because it will have from little to no value. And when that happens, not if, but when that happens, corporations that produce the food and distribute to the cities have no more incentive to do so. That's the theory. Okay. Okay. One final comment. Person said, "When are you going to make how to survive extinction video?" I think he said it in fun, but still, I'll address the issue. I'm saying there is nothing, absolutely nothing we can do about extinction, the extinction of our species. It's guaranteed. It will happen. No amount of foresight, no technology, no intelligence. Those are not antidotes. We cannot do anything about extinction. Okay, so I just want to make that absolutely clear. Okay, let's move on to our physics segment. Okay, today we're going to be talking about specifically about opacity. We've had reflection, we had transmission, we had refraction. Today we do a little bit of this dull subject called opacity. Why are things opaque? Not really why. What I want to explain is the mechanism of all four of these. How does light work when it reflects, when it goes through a transparent medium? How does it refract, and why or how it produces opacity, that something is opaque? You can't see through walls. You can see through glass. And even though you see through glass, when you see like through water, well, you get that pencil that you put in the water, it's broken in half, and why does that happen? What's going on there, And so all these issues have to do with how light behaves. And in order to do that, you got to understand a little bit about light, especially what the hell is light? What is this thing we call light? Okay, that's essentially what we need to get wrap our mind around. And the issue here is that we have to contrast what mathematical physics is light versus what we do in this channel, which is the rope model. Okay, there is a difference, a significant difference, I'd say, completely different difference. What does quantum say specifically, but it applies to relativity and string theory as well? Well, they deal with particles. And when they don't do particles, they do waves. And when they don't do waves, they do particles or wave packets. They do discrete one-way mechanisms. Okay, that's essentially it. Because even the wave is taken to be a packet. Okay. The wave, they chop it off, and you say, well, hold it, what came before the wave, what comes after the wave? They chop the wave, and they say, here's the wave, and you see it from beginning to end right in front of your eyes. Well, I thought the wave extends all the way to the edge of space-time. So why do they chop it off? Is the wave choppable? I mean, if light comes out of an atom, originates in an atom, and let's assume it's a wave, transverse wave, especially when it travels, because the notion is that it departs and arrives as a particle because that's when you detect it, but in between it travels as a wave, as a transverse wave, okay? Meaning it's transverse motion up and down in perpendicular to the direction in which it travels. Okay, fine. So what are we talking about? What is this wave? Wave of what? And because they never figured it out, they say it's a wave of nothing. That's more or less the party line. And so we're not dealing with physics anymore, because now we're talking about a ghost. We're talking about a spirit that is waving. So we need to get a handle on what is light. okay, in order to be able to give you a physical interpretation of how light behaves during reflection, refraction, transmission in the case of transparent medium, and opacity. Okay. Okay, so one fellow says, and this is more or less what most people think out there, okay, this is what they have in the backs of their minds, says something is transparent if the photons, what? Passing through it. Everybody thinks of this photon passing through a medium, okay, are not fully absorbed. That is, their energy, look at the words he uses, cannot or is not fully absorbed by the electrons in its substrate. It may bend the light. Bend the light? How do you bend the light? Okay, look at the wording, okay? As water does or absorb certain wavelengths. Absorb a wavelength? What are you absorbing? What is a wavelength? Wave of what? Wave of nothing. So how can you have the wave of nothing? How can you absorb nothing? Okay? It may reflect some of it back. And again, all this is the nonsense that comes from mathematical physics. They learn these words by rote, like poetry, you recite. And we have nothing in front of us because we don't have what is energy? Energy is a concept, a mathematical concept. What is a wavelength? Wavelength of what? Of a wave? What is a wave? What is a transverse wave? Waving of what? Of nothing. And so far we have nothing in this whole so-called explanation, this notion this individual has. And this is what the majority of people think out there who are in physics or mathematical physics. They think, that it's got to do with absorbing energy, absorbing wavelengths. We have the wrong language to begin with. We cannot understand this. And all this is based on the planetary model that you see there, where you see the electron bead, the blue electron bead orbiting the atom. You don't like orbiting? Fine. You can say it's here and there and there. You don't know where it's at. It doesn't matter. All we have in front of us is a red ball in the center, supposedly the proton, and a blue ball on the outside called the electron. So we have one ball next to another ball. That's what you have. You have a tennis ball or a golf ball next to a bowling ball. So what keeps that electron ball bead tied to the proton bowling ball? Why doesn't it fly away spontaneously? Why doesn't it fall to the nucleus? So unless you can explain that, you don't have a model, and all this that this fellow said there falls apart completely. We can't talk about energy. We can't use the word wavelength because we're not talking about anything physical up to this point. Okay? And this is where it starts. We start on the wrong foot. We start with the wrong language. Another fellow says, light goes through the walls of my greenhouse. No. Light does not go through, because if light goes through, you're talking about particles or waves. There's no such thing as waves. I guess then that leaves particles. It turns out that according to the religion of quantum mechanics, there are no such things as corpuscles. The so-called particle is an equation, a wave function, or whatever they call it. They got all these synonyms for it, but we don't have a physical object in front of us. So you cannot talk about traveling through. And even if we remove the roof of your greenhouse, light is still stopped by the atoms of air. Light does not go directly to your little plant. It has to go through all this air that's in between the sun and your plant. And people think that light is a little ball that just goes through these gazillions of atoms. Remember, the air covers our whole planet. It doesn't stop here where we breathe. It goes all the way to out there, almost to outer space. We have a very thick layer of air covering our planet. Thanks to that, we can breathe. And here's this little photon. It's going through all these atoms of air and other garbage that's floating around there and reaching your little plant right through the glass in your greenhouse. Man, that's a mighty photon, right? A little photon ball or wave that can go through all these atoms. Okay, is that what's really happening? And so what do we say to this? Well, we say this: that this is the worldly wisdom. It's misleading intuition. Okay, you think that's what's happening because you think that light is coming directly to your eyes without anything being in between there, and you forget that all that stuff that you're breathing is between your eye and whatever you're looking at. And it's like you're saying, well, it's going right through there. Well, what do you mean it's going right through there? What is going through there, and is it going through there? And so the question is that what Mother Nature does? Okay? And that's why in science, because of this misleading intuition, we don't rely on eyes, meaning observation. We don't rely on hands, experiments. And we don't rely on testimony, meaning evidence. None of those are part of science. Those are all part of religion. In religion, we observe, and in religion, we do experiments, and in religion, we present evidence to convince the jury because we're targeting their belief. In science, we don't do any of that. In science, we do thinking because we're trying to understand the mechanism that Mother Nature uses to do these magic tricks. And so we rely on reasoning, and you have to be able to explain the cause. In other words, make a movie of the mechanism. Only then can we understand what you're talking about, and only then can we visualize the mechanism. You can only visualize a mechanism if you put objects there. You know, give a simple example, you throwing a stone through the window, and I film it. I show you the film, and you know how the window broke. You say, okay, how did the window break? Well, you're not going to use words like force and wave and energy. No, you're going to say a rock went through the window. And we don't care how strong the window is. We don't care any about all those mathematical nonsense that have nothing to do with the question at hand. I just want to know why the glass is on the floor. And you say a rock went through the window. That's how we explain it in physics. Very simple, baby-like, kindergarten-ish. We understand it. And that's what we need to do with light. The only reason we don't do it with light, gravity, and magnetism, so on, is because we can't see the mediators. That's the only reason. You can't see or touch the mediators. You can't see the mediator of light. You can't touch it. You can't see the mediator of gravity or touch it. You can't see the mediator of magnetism directly with your hand. I mean, you know, you can see it with iron filings. For that matter, I can see the mediator of gravity too, by throwing the pencil, and I say, well, it's gravity. Yeah, but how did it happen? So you can't see the mediator any more than you can see the mediator of magnetism as well. And if we cannot see or touch the mediators, it is useless to go to the lab and do an experiment. You're not going to figure this out through an experiment. We've done all the experiments we ever need to do, especially like for gravity or light. Here's the experiment for gravity. This is all you need to know. That's it. The only experiment. Repeatable. Okay, let's do it twice. Repeatable experiment. You let go of the pen, it falls to the floor. Now you tell me what caused the pen to fall to the floor. And hopefully this is kindergarten stuff. I mean, really kindergarten stuff. Mother Nature is a very simple woman. She doesn't do any sophisticated math. She just deals with objects. You just have to figure out what came in contact, physical contact with the skin of the pen. Once you figure that out, we're done. It's simple stuff. It's baby stuff. That means there's something here that we can't see or touch that is coming in physical contact with the pen. The pen is aware of it, but your hand is not. Okay, that's what we're saying here. Okay, so all we need to do is make visible the invisible stuff. Once we do that, it's kindergarten stuff. It's like if I throw the stone through the window, but you don't see the stone. And I just move my hand and the window breaks. And you say, how did you do that? That's magic. Yeah, it's magic only because you didn't see the stone. Okay, but if I make a movie of it and visualize it for you, in other words, I show you the stone, you say, that's stupid stuff. I mean, any kid can understand that. You threw a stone. It's only because you can't see the stone that it's so magical. You say, oh, how did you break the window? And this is no different than that. The only reason you think this is magical is because you can't see the physical objects Mother Nature uses to perform this magic trick. Okay? You can't see what's in contact with this pen. That's it. That's the only issue. Other than that, it's kid stuff. Once you could see that, if Mother Nature or God or the devil, whoever, comes over here and shows you the invisible mediators that they use, that's stupid stuff. That's ridiculous. It's baby stuff. It's kindergarten stuff. The only reason it's magical is you can't see or touch the mediators. No experiment done in the lab will ever elucidate the invisible mediators. For that, you got to drink a beer, sit back, and visualize. Think. Use your brain, not your hands. Okay? Okay, so here we have the waves, and this person thinks, or these people, because there's many of them, they think that these waves go through the walls. And I'm saying, waves, particles, whatever you want, they don't go through wall of bricks, wall of glass, wall of water, or wall of air. So if some of these are transparent, it's got nothing to do with going through. Okay, because for that, first of all, you have to identify the mediator. And you can't use the word wave because wave is not a mediator. Okay, you got to, in physics, you have to absolutely identify the physical object. Okay, how do we do it with ropes? Well, there it's very simple. You have these ropes, and what these ropes are doing, they're attached to atoms. And so I haven't shown all the atoms here, obviously, and we have a rope attached, for example, to that water block there. It's attached to one atom there, and that atom is attached to another one and another one and another one until it goes all the way to the other side. And that's why you can see through water. Okay, same with air and same with a glass window. Okay, so this is what you have to keep in mind. Okay, this is once you identify the mediator, in this case the electromagnetic rope, that's a piece of cake. You say, okay, one atom is attached to another, and one stimulates the other one. You have these torsions going from one atom to another, and now you can see what's happening. What's happening is a relay mechanism. It's not that I can see you directly through the air. It's that whatever light is going back and forth is going through each one of those atoms, from one atom to the next atom to the next atom to the next atom to the next atom, at the speed of light. Why? Because there's nothing really traveling back and forth. What you have is a torsion. If you want to call that torsion travel, be my guest. But it's twirling in situ. And so because it twirls in situ, it can go very fast, speed of light. And because of that, all you have is this whole row of ropes, one attached to the next atom down the road. And I can see the window because of that, because, the rope carries that signal, that torsion that arrives at my eye. So it's not that I can see the window directly, as these people think, that there's some kind of photon bead, point particle that's coming to my eye and hitting my eye, which is the notion that we've had for, 10,000 years now? No, there is no little particle that's traveling to my eye. The reason the mathematicians chose that is it was easier to model, even to this day, their equations based on a pinpoint. They can put what they're looking at is they can model that with an equation that tells them something about position, as they call it, location of that particle. And they say, okay, this particle is here now, here. We measure, we know the speed. That's what they're talking about. But they don't know, it's like I say, it's they did all this math on fish and ocean. And it turns out that Mother Nature works with eagles, or birds and air. So all their equations are applied to the wrong objects and to the right medium, to the wrong media, okay? You can do all the equations you want. Unless you identify the physical object, all your equations are in vain. Okay? Because again, you might think that there's a little trickle, a little sequence, a little series of particles reaching your eyes, and it turns out that those so-called particles that you're describing with your equation are really a rope torquing in place. Okay, so it's a very different mechanism. And so what is your equation worth if you're applying it to the wrong invisible entity? This is where we have a problem. Okay, and so this is what I like to say, that he who proposes a physical mediator for light has the burden of illustrating the mediator. That's the first thing you got to do, okay? You can't just say a wave did this and a point particle did that. No, please illustrate your stuff first, then begin your talk. If you cannot illustrate, especially your atom or your particle of light, if that's what you're going to propose, or your wave of light, and tell us what is that mechanism or that entity that's there in front of us. If you can't start there, you can't even start your talk. We take the microphone away from your mouth. Okay? You got a lot of work to do. You got to go to your dark basement and brainstorm until you get a physical entity. We don't have an entity yet. You can't do physics. You need an entity to do physics. Okay? In explaining what causes their mediators to travel rectilinearly. If you're going to use the particle model, why does it travel in a straight line? I mean, like I explained a couple weeks ago, you look at yourself in the mirror and it's straight ahead. And you say, well, is that really true? Well, you know, you can take a laser and run it through lenses and it's a straight line. I mean, you can do that as scientifically as you want, as they say. You know, you can go to your dark basement and point it at mirrors, at lenses, or whatever, and you'll verify that light travels in a straight line. How is that possible with discrete particles when the entire world, the entire universe is moving? The Earth is moving right now around the sun. I know some people, the flat earthers, don't believe that, but you know, here you shoot these photons to the moon, you know, the laser ranging, and the Earth moves, so did the moon. And so what, all these particles, travel in curves, especially along warp space? So no, how do you explain rectilinear or straightness with discrete particles? That's one of the things you're going to have to explain, okay? Because light does travel straight. Light never curves around the corner. Okay, and people say, yeah, it does. No, it doesn't. You know, you do it all with straight lines. Okay, you don't have light curve around corners. Okay, and some people don't understand that. That's why, again, people have been misled by their intuition. Okay, that's what they think is happening. Okay, what is a substance causes the mediator to bounce during reflection? You know, why does that particle come back to you in one case, and you know, in the case of transparency, you continue straight through the substance? I mean, if the photon is going to hit an atom, why does it bounce in one case, reflection? Why does it go through it, transparency, in another case? Okay, and so they have to go through all this rigmarole where they say, well, you know, in one case it absorbs the energy, the wavelength. In another case, it doesn't. So they have to go through all this mathematical wording that has nothing to do with physics. Yeah, we want to see the physical entities. We want to see you illustrate bouncing and going through. Okay, and that's where you got to say, well, the ping pong ball hit the proton bowling ball in the atom and bounced back, and then in this other case, it went through. How do you explain all that? Okay. What causes the mediator to stop, be absorbed, in other words, during opacity? What causes the mediator to go through a transparent substance? Yeah, okay. And explain why the mediator of light swerves and continues to travel rectilinearly through a substance during refraction. Remember, when it goes through water, or sometimes through glass, depending on the substance, you know, light curves, you could say, right? It bends. Not curves. It's a straight deflection, and then it continues straight. It's not like it's curving, you know. No, it's straight here and it's straight here, straight. It's just that it's like bent, chopped, you know, broken at that point. It's not a smooth curve. So you got to explain this. You got to explain how that photon suddenly hit a brick wall and then went off in a, I don't know, a 30-degree angle or whatever. That's what you got to explain. And then, of course, they cannot explain that. They just tell you what the angles are. They say, we measured, and we measured the angle, and this is the angle. I don't care about your angle. I want to know the mechanism. Okay, so angles is not going to answer the question. Snell's law and so on. Not going to figure it out. Okay, so we have one group of people, and they're prominent. They're known as How Stuff Works. I mentioned this the other day. And what they say, it's got to do with more atoms and fewer atoms. And they say light waves run into very few atoms, few of them, referring to the atoms, when they shine through air. So the people here in How Stuff Works, they believe that it's got to do with how many atoms there are. Okay. The more atoms, I guess, the less you can see. Is that the theory? Okay, let's look at this. Let's find out if that's true. Okay, and here we have this situation. Here you are, and you're looking at the window during the day. Okay, and you can see the window perfectly well. There's a sun shining out there, and you're just staring at the window. Okay. So far, so good. Now what happens? Towards the evening, or as the day progresses, suddenly, the sun goes down and everything starts becoming reddish. Okay, so suddenly you don't see the window as well as you used to. And by the time you reach nighttime, you can't see the window at all. Okay, now you can barely see the window. So what happened here? Suddenly the window disappears. Why? Are there more atoms between your eye and the window? Is that what's happened? God put more atoms there at the end of the day? And you don't have to wait till nighttime. I mean, you can do this with a lamp. You turn the lamp off, maybe at night, and everything's dark. You can't see the window. You turn the lamp on, now you can see it. So when you turn the lamp on, there are fewer atoms in front of your eyes from your eyes to the window, and then when you suddenly turn the lamp off, more atoms come in there. Now you can't see the window. Is that what it is? Is that the theory? Talk about Ptolemaic explanations. That's how stuff works. They should be kicked out of science. That's what they should be doing. That's what we should do with them. Okay, so I ran an experiment with my dear wife, and here it is. It's polarization, okay? And when you have these two polarized lenses, if you turn them at 90 degrees to each other, you have opacity. You can't see through them. On the other hand, if they're both aligned, like, horizontally, then the laser runs right through them. Through both of them, you can see the laser at the screen. Okay, so did we put more atoms in between them when we turn them around? Or is it, or does this opacity and transparency have to do with the location of the molecules or atoms or whatever? Okay, so that's the first question for you. Here's another experiment we did, and this one was with tape. You take tape and you turn it around, and it doesn't stop light like the lenses did. These are not polarized. What you have is a tape, a transparent tape. You run a laser through it. We didn't do it too well, not very scientific, but that doesn't matter. I guess you get the idea. You can do it at home. Just take a laser and point it at two pieces of tape, transparent tape, okay, cellophane, and just put the tapes at 90 degrees to each other, and then again turn it around, and you'll see that it doesn't stop the light at all. Okay, so the fact that you turned one tape 90 degrees to the other doesn't do the same thing as the polarized lenses. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say here. Okay, just in case, we did it with a plastic box that I had there. Okay, and here it is. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, and so here you have light going through this. You could use glass. You can use, in this case, I had this plastic box, which is handy. And if you shine through this plastic box, you can see it doesn't stop the light. Light, whether you put it at 90 degrees or not, it doesn't become opaque. Okay, that's the point. Okay, but in the case of the polarizing lenses, yes, it does block. It does become opaque just by putting one at 90 degrees to the other. Okay, so when they're lined up, like, both up and down, light goes through, it's transparent. Suddenly you turn it around, and now it's opaque. It sounds like to me that's got to do with the molecules that make the material. What do you think? Okay. I don't think we put more air molecules between the two lenses because we turn one around. Okay, so this to get you thinking about this, okay? Okay, let's continue here. Here's polarization according to quantum mechanics, okay? They say that when you turn it around, and this was Fresnel's explanation, the 1820s, and what he said is, when you turn one of these polarizer or polarizing materials sideways, what you're doing is blocking part of the signal of light. And today, they've improved upon that, and they say, well, you have this electric field and this magnetic field that make up the wave, the transverse wave of light that we don't know what it is. So they use these words. They say it's an electric field and a magnetic field. Unfortunately, the word field refers to a mathematical concept that just says a bunch of numbers. That's all a field is. And so it doesn't help us much, but we still have a problem. Even if we concede the field as a physical object, we're going to say that it's a physical object. We have one which runs at 90 degrees to the other. Are we saying that by putting this picket fence there, which is what this is called, this explanation, by putting this picket fence, we are eliminating the magnetic field in this example here, and only the electric field is what goes through? Can light be made only of an electric field? Okay, so the vertical in this case apparently chops off the magnetic field. In this specific instance, right, we're talking about a single beam, a single wave. And what these people are saying is that the picket fence put at 90 degrees to the other one blocks out one of the components of light, and that's in this case the magnetic field, which means only the electric field got through. And what they're saying at that point is that that light that you see there going to the second polarizer, that's only made up of an electric field. So yeah, the question is whether you accept this explanation, because this is what these people are saying. They're saying that only one component of the transverse wave got through. Okay. Okay, I think we need to figure out, in order to understand polarization, in other words, right, light goes through it, the two films are transparent, right, and you turn one of them around 90 degrees and suddenly it's opaque. Light does not go through. Okay, it gives us an idea that something's related to the molecule, but then we got to see what these molecules look like, maybe even what the atoms look like. Unfortunately, we only have bird's eye visions of atoms. Some people say, oh, we filmed and we photographed and et cetera, imaged atoms. Only from a bird's eye perspective. Give me an atom, anyone that you want. Look it up through Google, whatever, Google images, whatever. And what you'll find is bird's eye views. You see a ball, bunch of balls. That's all you'll see. Well, that doesn't look very much like a little bead going around. What it looks like is a ball. It looks like this. That's what they look like. This is not a little bead going around. So what quantum proposes for their atom, which is the orbital. What is an orbital? It's a region where you can find the little bead. That's not what you see. What you see is a membrane. You see a ball. Okay? That's the first issue. But even assuming that, we need to know what these atoms look like. Okay? And these are the images that we have. Again, they're not pictures, they're not movies that we filmed. These are images that we make artificially. Okay? And this is what carbon looks like, more or less. They have the little beads going in there. Okay? You'll see that in a second here. The beads are going around because that's the quantum version. But really, the carbon atom looks like membrane. That's at least what we propose, and that's what chemistry uses. Not what physics uses, in other words, mathematical physics. What they use is a little bead. But the chemistry and the version we propose are exactly the same in this sense. We're talking about membranes, what you see there. Okay. Here's the same one for oxygen. Okay, this is oxygen. Again, they have the little beads going around because they want to talk about electron beads. And what we're saying is that's not what an atom looks like. An atom looks like, you know, the membrane that's on the outside. And those membranes are made out of the threads that make up the rope and that later on will make up the atom itself. So this is what the atom looks like. That's an oxygen molecule according to us, okay? Okay, so if that's what the oxygen atom looks like, if that's what the carbon atom looks like, what we're proposing, okay? We're going to apply this to calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is the material that they use, one of the materials that they use for these polarizing or polarizers, these polarizing material, okay? So here's what the atoms look like. Each individual atom apparently looks like. Again, I can't put my hand in the fire. I can only go by what these people have picked up over the years. And it looks pretty much like the ones I'm proposing anyway, so I have no problem with them. And here's what they look like. Here you have the calcium on the left-hand side, and it's a big atom compared to carbon and oxygen. And what you're staring at there is 3 levels of S. You got S1, S2, and S3, which are the balls, the round spherical balls. And within that, you have the p orbitals, which are those extensions that come out of the S shells. Okay? And so calcium looks more or less like that. Carbon is a little simpler, oxygen a little more complicated than carbon, but that's more or less what you have, the constituents of the calcium carbonate molecule, okay? And when you put them together, this is more or less the appearance of the calcium carbonate. Let me get myself back in here. This is more or less what it looks like. It looks like a little gingerbread man, okay? You have the calcium on the top, okay? You have the oxygen atoms, the p orbitals merged with the calcium atom and also with a carbon atom. 2 of them, one merged with one and the other one merged with the other. And then you have a third oxygen atom at the other end. So this is more or less what the calcium carbonate molecule looks like. And that's what we're going to be using to build our polarizer, our polarizing material. And it's got to be oriented. Now, I oriented it as a gingerbread man. It could be sideways for all we know, okay? I don't know that. All I can do is go more or less by what we have so far today. Again, we haven't seen the molecule itself. We don't have a photograph of the molecule. So all we can do is speculate and more or less try to visualize what this molecule looks like, okay? So let's build one line of these gingerbread men, okay, these calcium carbonate. And here you see it, okay? This is more or less what they look like. We put one next to each other. Again, I put them in this direction. You don't have to put them in, you can put them sideways for all I know. You know, we don't really know, or you can look at it from the bottom upwards for all we know. I just put them in this direction arbitrarily just to make my point. Okay, there we have a line, okay, this line of calcium carbonate atoms, okay. Let's build a little more. We're going to build a little wall now, okay. Here we see the wall, okay, several layers of this, okay. Let's assume that's what we have in one of these slabs of calcium carbonate, okay. And now we're going to connect them. We're going to connect 2 of these walls with the ropes. And we're going to just connect one rope because obviously there are many ropes. Imagine each one of these atoms, you have to think of them as a bunch of hydrogen atoms. For each hydrogen atom that constitutes carbon, for each hydrogen atom that constitutes oxygen, we're talking about one rope, okay? So we're just going to put one rope, and here's what it looks like more or less. Let me get this one out of the way, okay? And we're going to put a rope from a source, could be a laser, to that first atom, and from those, you're going to have a series of ropes connecting all these atoms, and then it's going to connect those atoms to the wall behind it, okay, and from there on, further on. Now here they're aligned. The gingerbread men are all aligned in the front with the ones in the back, and so light goes through. It's transparent. The material, these two slabs are vertical, okay, and they're transparent. You shine the light through, it goes right through. Okay, so far so good. Now, what are the possibilities here? What are some of the variables that we're going to look at to try to visualize, understand what's going on in front of us in this magical, invisible, intangible world of Mother Nature's? What's going on in that world? Okay, that's what we're going to try to see if we can visualize it, we can understand it. Okay, that's what I'm getting to. And here is what I think is going to happen here when you switch one of those around. Okay, and you can see here they were straight, and light goes directly from one slab to the other. Now we're going to turn one of those slabs around 90 degrees. Look at what happens to the ropes. Okay, they're no longer straight. The ones that were going straight, now they're no longer straight. Okay, so I think this is one of the factors you should consider when you analyze what's happening with a rotation of one polarizer with respect to another. And again, what we're talking about here is that suddenly what was transparent became opaque. Okay, do we understand ourselves? Okay, this is what I'm saying. Okay, so just by rotating, all you did was just change the location of existing atoms. We did not put more atoms in there like how stuff works alleges. So it's not like we put more atoms in there. Okay, and those people who say, well, the wavelength was absorbed or the energy was absorbed, well, all we did was switch them sideways. Why would the electrons now not absorb those same photons? So is it a question of just absorbing energy, absorbing wavelengths, whatever wave is? Obviously, there's something more involved here, and it's got to do solely when we went from transparent to opaque. All we did was change the location of the atoms. The same atoms, you just switched them around, and suddenly what was transparent became opaque. Okay, we got that? Okay, so that's one of the things you got to consider. What's another one? Well, here's my magic rope, okay? And I'm going to do this sideways so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have the rope, okay? And one of my fists is a source, or you could have the polarizer here and the other polarizer over here. As long as they're aligned, they're both up and down, so to speak, then you have the normal torsions, okay? Normal torsions coming from the laser. What happens when you turn one of them around? Okay, that's what we're going to look at. So I'm going to turn one of these around, and you can see what's happening. Suddenly you have a quarter wave, quarter link, that's offset with respect to this. Here it was like that, and now when you turned it around, you get a different frequency, a different link length. Okay, you see what happened just by a 90-degree turn of my hand? Okay, so what I'm saying is these are the things you have to consider when you're looking at least from the rope model, when you're looking at these slabs. One of them is that the ropes are no longer straight ahead. Okay, now this rope is turned with respect to the other rope over there. And the other one is that you're also twisting the rope. Okay, so these are two factors you have to consider when you try to explain, when you try to understand what may be happening in there. Okay, now I can't tell you exactly what's going on in there. I'm not going to tell you that I do know. Okay, all I can do is give you a theory on the one hand, and I can give you on the other hand something to look for, something that you can test with your mind and find out, is this possibly true? That you can rationalize it, that you can reason it. Okay, you can't do that with anything provided by quantum mechanics. Okay, now let me throw another variable here just to drive you nuts, completely nuts. Okay, here we did an experiment with my son, Uns, and you can turn the slab of calcium carbonate, you can turn it around, and the atom now is in a different location with respect to the first slab. So if both slabs are, like parallel there, and you turn one of them around, whichever, well, what you did is the atoms, the molecules, or the atoms that constitute the molecules, now they've moved sideways. They moved at 90 degrees. So here's the $1,000,000 question, okay? Listen carefully. Can you do that with oxygen, air? Can you do that with H2O, water? Okay, and let me show you the experiment we did with my son, okay? Nobody asked this question in a million years, so here it is for you for the first time. My son turned the water around. Now you can see that little plastic dime there, the plastic coin, and it does move from horizontal to vertical. Is that what happened with the atoms that make up water? Is that what happened with the molecules that make up water? Did they also turn around? Or did gravity continue to pull on those molecules in the same direction, whether you turned it around or not? Okay, let's be more specific so that you see what I'm talking about. Okay, here you have a molecule of water. Okay, let me remove this one here for a second. Okay, here you have a molecule of water. Okay, let's assume that because oxygen is the big atom, okay, oxygen is made up of 8 hydrogen atoms. Okay, it had to be squashed in the sun under pressure to make that oxygen atom. So what do we mean by that? It means that 8 ropes are coming out of that oxygen atom. Okay, but that's not important for what I want to say right now. I just want you to be aware of that. Whereas the hydrogen only has 1 rope, oxygen has 8 ropes. Okay, so that's got to be understood. Oxygen is tied to the center of the Earth, according to the rope model. Okay, so are the hydrogen. We're just going to make an assumption here. Assumption, no proof, no evidence. Assumption. We're going to make an assumption that that the molecule of water is positioned in that direction with respect to the center of the Earth. Okay? So when I turn the water around, okay, and here we're going to turn water around, okay, please bear with me here. Is that what happens to the water molecule? Are we turning it around, or does it remain in the same position as you see it on the left-hand side there? Does the oxygen continue to stay downwards when you move water around? Okay, so this is the question before you. Okay, here's a bunch of water molecules. Okay, is that what happens, or is this what happens? Look at these 2 pictures. You'll see that there's a little difference. Okay, in one case, water turns around because you turn the whole glass around. In the other case, the water molecules remain in the same direction with respect to the center of the Earth because gravity pulls them in the same direction. In other words, there is no change in the location of the molecules as it is in the calcium carbonate crystal structure. Okay? Hopefully you understood what I'm saying here. That we have a difference between calcium carbonate, which is in a rigid crystal structure. You move it sideways. Now you've moved those molecules, those atoms in a different direction. Does that happen with water? How about with air? Okay, let's look at air now. Okay, here's air. Okay, here's the air molecule. I put 2 oxygen atoms. Okay, so there's your air molecule. Does this air molecule stand up like that? That's the question for you. Okay. Yeah, you can see that when you turn air around, if you can do that, you grab air and just turn it around. Okay, is that what happens to the molecule? Assuming, the 2 oxygen atoms are more or less parallel, or I guess tied to the center of the Earth in a symmetrical way. Can you unsymmetricize them? Can you have one oxygen atom be closer to the center of the Earth than the other? Or whichever way you move your balloon with the air inside it, the atoms in there adjust their position with respect to the center of the Earth, to gravity. Which way is it? Okay. And again, here it is. This is one version, and this is the other version. Which one is true? Okay, I hope you understand what I'm showing here. In one case, the atoms change their location from horizontal to vertical, and the other one, they always remain horizontal. Okay, that's what I want to show here. Okay. So those are the questions for you. Okay. I don't know if you have an answer for those questions, but these are, I think, the things that you have to factor. And one of the things that you can use this for is to destroy the flat Earth. Okay, and here, flat earthers never listen to. They keep asking the same question over and over. They never listen to the answer, and they just keep asking the same question over and over. They say, "How is it that you can curve water, let alone air?" And so now we have an answer for them. For those of you who are listening, flat earthers don't listen, so they don't know what I'm talking about here. But here it is. Okay. Every atom is connected to the center of the Earth, or to every atom on Earth, so it doesn't matter. But the center is the center of everything. Everything is pulled towards the center. Okay, and here you see it. The water molecules are all pointed towards the center of the Earth. Okay, now we're going to put the ropes in there. Okay, we're going to attach the ropes to all these atoms and molecules. First the water molecules, and now you're going to see the air molecules. Okay, and so now you can see why water curves around the Earth and why air curves around the spherical Earth. Hopefully it's spherical and not a disk, as it is in flatland. Okay, so I'm saying that the atoms have to follow gravity somehow. You cannot isolate gravity from our atoms. I don't care if it's oxygen. I don't care if it's, meaning air. I don't care if it's water. They have to be pulled towards the center of the Earth. And if I rotate my bottle of water, does the water stay, like in the case of the calcium carbonate crystal structure, flabs, whatever? Okay, that's the question for you. And that's food for thought, okay, for you to ponder before we can move on to other subjects in the coming weeks. But here's good old Mother Nature, and what she does is she spends the whole day just knitting her ropes, okay. Okay, let's go with some of the questions, some of the issues people raise here. Okay, questions since last time, comments that people made. Okay, so let's move on with these. One fella says, ether is a bunch of particles. You don't even know what you're criticizing. Okay, sorry. Ether theories and particle theories are only infamous for being total theoretical enemies, and you couldn't even get that part right. Okay, for your information, ether is, let's find out what ether is. Okay, ether in any theory about it is a field. A field. And all permeating fluid. Okay, so this fellow thinks that a field is a fluid, and he visualizes some kind of, I don't know, oil or water or something like that, some fluid, maybe air, that is floating out there in space, or that space is this ether, this fluid. Space itself is it. So one of the two, and they never answer the question. Some people, because you have different opinions there, some people think that ether is something separate from space, that ether is contained within space, as if space were a container that's got borders, I guess, or maybe is infinite, okay? Because if it's infinite, the ether is infinite, And then it's not an object because all objects are finite, because an object is that which has shape. So we got a problem there. But yeah, they haven't resolved whether ether is something separate from space or space and ether are identical. It's the same thing. In which case we got a problem because a fluid is made out of discrete particles. That's why it's fluid, according to at least the mathematical version of it. And so we need to identify what those particles are. What are those little balls that make up this fluid, this field? That's what we need to figure out. But we don't even need to go that far. Here we have a definition of the word field. A region of space. Is a region a physical object? Absolutely not. Region of the hand, like for example the palm, is not a physical object. The only way the palm becomes a physical object is if you cut off the fingers and just show the palm, then it's a physical object, a standalone physical object. Otherwise, the palm is a region of the hand. China is a region of the earth. There is no region, a standalone region. Region is always of something else. And so if that's what a field is, according to the definitions that are out there, then we have a problem. And then a physical quantity, that's how it's defined. Okay? And what is it? Represented by a number that has a value for each point in space and time. So this fellow says that he wants to do it with a field. That's what he says that a ether is. And all we can tell him is that there is no such monster as a field. There's no such monster as a region. And essentially, a field is just a value at each point in space. It's a mathematical concept. Okay? And so you can't say ether is a bunch of numbers. No, ether is a bunch of particles. That's why he referred to it as a fluid. And here it is. Okay, let me put it on this side. A bunch of numbers that are vibrating. That's a field. Is that what ether is? Okay, so yeah, people who propose the ether have no idea what they're talking about because they never defined the ether. And if they defined it, then they screwed up anyways. Because if you can define the ether, it's not an object. We don't define objects in physics. We point to them. Define, we define concepts. If ether is a concept, you can't use it in physics. So the only way to show the world what ether is to point at it. For that, you have to illustrate it. Point to a site that you know of where you got the ether, maybe upload it to your own site. And we want to see what the ether looks like. Don't define it, because if you define it, you lost already. Okay? You're not doing physics. You can't use words as objects that you defined. You can't use the word table if you're going to define the word table. We don't define the word table in physics. We point to it. We point and say table. Now you can do whatever you want with it. But if you say, well, let me tell you what a table is. It's a board that's got 4 legs. That's a concept. That's not a table. Table is something else in physics. Okay, another fellow says, why is the sky blue? Well, blue light frequency gets scattered by the molecules in the air. Again, they think it's all this particles floating around. That's what they've been taught, or they might think it's waves. One way in every sense. They don't realize that what they're trying to explain, because when they talk about absorbing frequency or absorbing wavelength, what they're talking about is, again, relay. They're not talking about going through. Okay, and so they don't realize this. Okay, says the other frequencies don't or hardly interact with air and go straight through. This is the notion people have. And again, it's because they do experiments instead of doing thinking. In science, we don't do experiments. In science, we explain them. Okay? And so this is what I can say to this fellow. Okay, here it is. Irrational to say that frequencies interact. Irrational to say that frequencies go straight through. No such physical object as frequency. Okay? In science, in physics. It's what happens when irrational folk fail to identify the objects that mediate phenomena. You can't talk about frequency as if it were a physical object. Say frequency does this and frequency does that. No. Mention the object that does this and that, not the frequency. Frequency is a property of an object, if anything. Okay? Frequency is what is known as an adjective, really, in this case, an adverb. Okay? There is no such noun as frequency in science. In ordinary speech, yeah, it's a noun. In physics, it's not a noun. Okay? Frequency was something does. It's an adverb. Okay? Until you identify the object in your theory, you haven't said anything. So this poor fellow, he doesn't have really an explanation. So he just repeated what he heard out there and without understanding what he was saying. Another fellow says, there is a change in velocity of the light. Only when I'm drinking too much beer. Okay? Light never changes its velocity. It always travels at little c, no matter through what medium. Why? Because it doesn't travel at all. It's a torsion along a rope that extends between any two atoms. So there is no traveling through. And there is no such thing as this speed. All you're doing is changing one parameter for another. You're saying that the more links that you have, the smaller they are. And the fewer links that you have, the longer they are. Okay, and that's what C equals frequency times wavelength, the wave equation states. Okay, so that equation that you're staring at, that's the equation of a rope. There is no other object that can simulate that. Maybe a chain, but it's got to be a chain, a rope, something along those lines. Okay, and in the case of a chain, you can't do that either because the links are of a certain size. With a rope, the links become smaller the more links you have for a given length of rope. Do the experiment at home, always in the presence of a relativist. Very dangerous experiment. Just take a rope and twist it. Okay, okay, and fellow says a wave is a perturbation. Well, what is a perturbation? That's a verb. So you're saying a wave is a verb. Yeah. Wave is a measurable result. And he says noun. No, result is not a noun, not in physics. That's in ordinary speech, in religion, not in physics. In physics, there's no such physical standalone object called a result, and only physical objects qualify as nouns for the purposes of physics. You cannot use as the subject of a sentence a verb, not in science. In ordinary speech, you can do whatever you want, but not in science. What is waving are the mediums listed above, and he mentioned water, air, light, and magnetism. So what is light? What is magnetism? What kind of medium is magnetism? Those are properties or events or things that happen. These are happenings. These are occurrences, phenomena. There's no physical object called magnetism. There's no physical object called light, really. Okay? You can talk about the rope, which simulates light. You can even talk about particles for that matter, meaning corpuscles, right? You can talk about that and say, look, light is mediated by particles. Yeah, that's fair game in physics, okay? But you can't say that light itself is a physical object. Light is a result. Light is what we call that phenomenon, okay? So you can't use the word light really, I mean, officially. Informally, yeah, you can do that, but not officially. When you talk officially in physics, you got to identify the physical object. Okay? Shape is the only assumption made besides location. Shape and assumption? So everything physical should follow from shape alone, the fellow says. A lot of people had problems with shape this time around, and this is just the first guy, okay? And so this is what I got to say. What does this even mean? What is this fellow possibly blabbing about? What do you mean by shape is an assumption? What does that mean? In physics, the assumption include objects, definitions, a statement of the facts. Okay? That's what an assumption is. It's known as a hypothesis. No such monster as shape is an assumption. Okay? Shape is an adjective, not a noun. Shape is a property of an object. So you cannot treat shape as a noun in physics, which is what this fellow is doing here. He's talking about shape. The theorist presents the objects and defines the key words, and shape is neither a key word nor an assumption. We do not use the word shape in physics almost at all. The only time we use the word shape is to define the word object, and the only reason for that is to distinguish it from what the mentally retarded mathematicians call an object, which is that which has which can be seen or touched. So what people don't understand, all these people who harp on the word shape, is the context. They don't understand it. They don't understand. They don't understand it. And so what I need to do sometimes, if I can reach it, is bang them with my dough roller over the head. Okay. Now, people who use the word shape or who attack the word shape or who want a definition of the word shape are mentally retarded people. Okay? I'll state it again. They're mentally retarded people because they don't understand the context. So let me explain the context. Let's see if you understand that. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm wasting my breath and my time. The context is that the idiots of mathematics, they define an object as that which you can touch or that which you can see. Then they go to the lab and they say, let's go and see if we can touch or see gravity. Let's go to the lab, see if we can touch or see the mediator of light. Let's go and see if we can touch or see the mediator of magnetism. That's the problem. And when they go there, they can't touch or see light, gravity, or magnetism. And so they say, And that's when they start introducing concepts such as field and wave and zero-dimensional particles. And they turn these into physical objects. They talk about fields and who knows what. And so what we're saying is, and this is the only context in which you're going to use the word shape and then never use that word again in science, is to define the word object so that we compare the criteria. We're saying that shape is not the same thing as see or touch. That's the end of it. Don't ever use the word shape again. Don't ever bother with the word shape again, or I'm going to beat you with my dough roller. Okay? Anyone who harps on the word shape means he's a mentally retarded individual who doesn't understand the context. The context, one more time, just so it goes through, is we're comparing shape as a criterion against the idiocy of mathematics, which talks about see and touch. That's it. We're done. No more. Never use the word again. Okay? Shape is what you learned in kindergarten. If you missed kindergarten, well, then go back there. You should go back there. And they'll show you what shape is. Any little kid will show you what shape is. You don't need to go to university to find out what the definition of the word shape is. They can show you a ball and they can show you a cube and say the difference between these two things is the shape. We're done. That's all you need to know. You got it? Or are you still mentally retarded? Okay? Let me make that clear. Anyone harping on the word shape is a mentally retarded individual who does not understand the context. Period. We're done. Okay? Never mention the word shape again, or I'll treat you with the respect that you deserve. Okay, here's the same fellow says, the shapes are identical. And see, they go into all this nonsense because, again, they want to get to the bottom of the word shape because they're mentally retarded individuals. Okay? The shapes are identical in the case of tangible, semi-tangible, and intangible, and yet the reaction is different. What does shape have to do with tangibility? What does shape have to do with tangibility? These people are off on a tangent. Tangibility. They're off on a tangent worrying about the word shape with totally mental retardation. There's nothing more that you can say about this. They don't understand the context. Okay? What does the spirit cause whatever it is, the scalar value from 1 to 0 tangibility chart? What does 1 and 0 have to do with shape? These are mentally retarded individuals who don't understand nothing. They're really completely lost. I don't know what these people are doing in physics. They should be in religion, okay, because they don't understand the context. And so this is what I answer. What does shape have to do with tangibility? What does shape have to do with reaction? What does shape or tangibility have to do with ones and zeros? Okay, so I don't know what these people are, what they have going through their tiny brains. I don't know what these people really have in their minds. Why are they harping the word shape? What does shape have to do with anything? All we're doing is comparing the word shape against touch and see, which is the current standard. And when people say, oh, you couldn't define shape, so I'm going back to, by default, right, to see and touch, to the lab to see if I can see and touch light, if I can see and touch gravity. This is what they have going through their minds. Okay, so that's why they harp on the word shape. It drives them nuts. No, we don't use the word shape. We use the word object in science. And the word object is not the word shape. Shape is a property of objects. Shape is an adjective, not a noun. In physics. In religion, they use it as a noun. We don't care about that. In physics, shape is an adjective. It's a property of an object. And so I don't know how to drive that point true. I mean, it's a waste of time sometimes with these people. Okay. It says tangibility is a concept. Not this magical third category called attribute that you sometimes bring up. The only concepts that I know about are relations between shapes. Relations between shapes. What the hell is this person talking about? Okay, and so here's my answer. Shape is a static property, attribute, characteristic of an object. Adjectives are used to qualify shape. Okay, in physics, adjectives are static concepts. Okay? Shape is the only universal property of objects. It is irrational to talk about relations between shapes. It is irrational to talk about distance between adjectives. Okay? It is irrational to talk about sizes of or orientations of or distances between adjectives. In physics, rationalists compare objects, not adjectives. Rationalists compare sphere versus cube, not spherical versus cubic. Spherical and cubic are adjectives. Sphere and cube are nouns. Okay, and it takes a religious individual or a mathematician 10 years to understand that. Okay? So yeah, you don't compare cubic against, you compare objects, not shapes. There's no such thing as shape. Shape is an adjective. So I don't know how to drive that through. Okay, again, more shape here, more shapey stuff. Shapes have concepts like distance. My God. Poor fella. Orientation, direction, even size. Size of shape. Size of spherical. Size of triangular. Poor fella. I mean, he probably missed kindergarten. I really think he did, So, well, this is what I have to say about that. I say, shapes don't possess concepts. Shape, physics, has nothing to do with size, which is math. Circular and triangular have no size. There is no such monster as distance between shapes. There's distance between objects, okay? There is no distance between cubic and spherical, because these are adjectives, those are the shapes. There is distance between cube and sphere, which are the objects. Okay? Orientation and direction are observer-related characteristics. Okay? So they don't have to do with shape, they have to do with your location with respect to something. The observer could be the object itself. Okay? Corollary, never use the word shape as a noun in physics. Okay, object is noun, shape is an adjective. Never use the word shape as a noun. Okay, the only time we use the word shape is to compare it against the idiocy proposed by mathematicians, and that is their notion that an object is that which you can see or touch. No, those are not the criteria because we can't see the air. Okay, and so means that air is not an object? Here, the air blew your house down, but it's not an object. It was a spirit. It was nothing. Okay, so something is wrong with the definition that the mathematicians have been working with for the last 10,000 years. And just in case we have another individual, he says, sorry, can you tell everyone the definition of shape again? Mental retardation, that's what this is. You said shape is what distinguishes the inside of an object from the outside of it, and we treat both the inside and outside as objects. Then you said shape is the inability to blend with the immediate surrounding or environment. I wrote that in my book, yes. That's not a scientific definition. That's so that you know what I'm referring to in ordinary speech. We don't need the word shape in science. Okay? Now, but let me get to the bottom of this. What these mentally retarded individuals have, the problem they have. And here you see it. We have four words that define the word object. That which has shape. Now, the first question is, why didn't he ask, oh, what do you mean by that? Or what do you mean by which? What do you mean by has? I mean, are those words any easier to define than the word shape? And then the other issue is, do we have to define every word in the dictionary? And then once we define those, we got to define every word that we use to define that word as well? So we're off on a wild goose chase just defining words all day long because the guy said, well, what did you mean by this? And what did you mean by that? No, we don't do that in science. In science, we don't have to define any of those four words. Okay, we had to define the word object because mathematicians define it as that which you can see or touch. So we had to define what an object is in the alternative if it's not see and touch. And so the only universal property of all objects, all objects have is shape. It's a property. And properties in physics are adjectives. So shape is an adjective we say spherical, we say triangular, we say cubic. That's what shape is. And what I mentioned is adjectives. Okay? And so I don't know how to drive that point through. But I'll say something else regarding the word shape. And that's that all these people, what they do is they play devil's advocate to extreme levels. And they say, well, you can't define the word shape, meaning that by default, they go back to the mathematical world where it's see and touch. So I turn the tables around on them and I say, okay, define see, define touch. Can you define those words any more than you can define shape? And so I'll define shape the day you define see and touch. How's that for a championship, for a contest? Okay, how's that? Yeah, I'll define shape when you define see and touch. Okay. No, we don't need to define see, touch, or shape, not to any high degree. All we need to do is choose a criterion to define the word object. We can't do physics without objects because if you don't use objects to do gravity, magnetism, light, or electricity, or whatever, then you're in effect introducing spirits into your theory. You're saying that it's done by black magic. That's why objects are absolutely necessary in physics, and because that's the first, what I call the golden rule of physics, or the golden principle, that you need an object to do physics. The first word you need to define in physics is the word object. The only other, I could say there's a word before that, and there's the word definition itself. You need to define what a definition is. And we've defined all these words. We define what irrational is. We define all these words because we need to get a handle on the language. Can't continue using words like field and energy anymore, or wave. Okay, a fella says, so if I roll a rock down a hill, it magically becomes a concept and not an object. Absolutely. You just said it, okay? The rock is an object before you do anything with it. After you roll it, you are referring to the action and not to the rock. So action is a dynamic concept. Yes, so once you roll it, rolling rock is not a physical object. A rock is an object, not a rolling rock. A flying eagle is not a physical object. An eagle is an object. Swimming fish is not a physical object. A fish is an object. Okay, do you get the hang of it? Okay. And so, yeah, here we say rolling rock is not an object. Rolling rock is a movie of a rock in motion. Many frames of a film do not qualify as a stand-alone object. For the purposes of physics, an object is a finished product. Could be a picture, drawing, snapshot, statue, etc. An object is that which has shape, not an image in motion. Shape is a static concept. There is no motion embodied in the word shape. Okay? Again, it's an adjective. All adjectives in physics are static concepts. Dynamic concepts are known as adverbs. Okay? So if you talk about rectilinearly, you're talking about motion. And rectilinearly is an adverb. Okay? And again, it's not the language of ordinary speech. Okay, so unless you get in tune with the language, you don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about the word motion. You say, well, that's a noun. Well, that's a noun in ordinary speech, not in physics. In physics, motion is a verb. Okay, we got that straight? Displacement, verb. Okay, so these are not nouns in physics. And this is where the problem is, where people have the wrong language. They start talking about motion. They say, well, the motion of Jupiter. No, in physics we say Jupiter moves. Moves is a verb. We don't say the motion of. Okay? The orbital or the orbit of Jupiter. No, we don't say the orbit of Jupiter. We say Jupiter orbits. Orbits is a verb, not a noun. Okay? Can't be turned into a noun in physics because we lose track. We're talking nonsense then. Okay, fellow says plasma is an electrically charged gas, which is a concept. Then later says, meaning me, right? Gas is an object. Oops, is gas a concept or an object? Well, gas is an object. Okay, and plasma is a dynamic concept. There's no physical object called plasma because in order for there to be a physical object, it's got to be static. I should be able to take a photograph or make a picture of it. You can't make a picture of plasma. And here is proof, evidence. Let's introduce it into court so that we convince people. Okay, gas, I can take a picture of. I don't need to know what it's made out of. I don't need to know if all that gas is made out of little particles. None of that. Here you have a static image of gas. Plasma, you have to ionize the atoms in the picture. And you can't do that. The only way you can have ionized, which is a verb, okay, is by removing, according to quantum, right, removing an electron from its atom or putting one in there in case of positive ions, right? And so if I had to remove is a verb, okay, I can't put the word remove in a photograph. Remove requires a movie, and a movie is never a physical object. It's always a dynamic concept. We're talking about a swimming fish. We're talking about a flying eagle. We're not talking about an eagle. We're not talking about a fish. Okay, so again, it takes a religious individual 10 years, sometimes never, to understand the difference between a concept and an object. Gas is an object, plasma is a concept. Sorry. Okay, destroys the electric universe entirely. Electricity itself is a concept, not a dynamic concept, really. Not a physical object. There's no physical object called electricity. Okay, and what do the idiots of the electric universe always say? They say, very simple, Bill. Put your fingers in an outlet and find out if it's a physical object. No, that's not the way we determine if it's an object. Okay, we don't go in there and run a test, run an experiment of any kind. In science, we define what an object is. If it meets the definition, it's an object. If it doesn't, it ain't. See how simple it was? And these people say, no, I want to run a test to find out if it's an object. I want to see if I can touch electricity. Well, can you touch the table that's on the other side of the universe? And if you cannot touch that table on the other side of the universe, is that table an object? You couldn't touch it. Can you see it? You can't see it. So you can't see or touch it. Is a table that's in Klingon land, is that a physical object? And so, yeah, if you can't answer that question, it's because you have no answer. Your definition of your criteria of see, touch dies right there. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, fellow clarifies there. Good clarification. The phrase made of implies more than one object. Okay, he's talking about mereology here. And so cannot be applied to the fundamental or a single piece object. If a table is made out, as far as physics is concerned, is made of a single piece, okay, it's not made of parts. Any object in physics that you point to and name for the purposes of presenting the object is made of a single piece. We don't care what it's made out of. You point to gas, we don't care if it's made out of little atoms. That's not the issue. We know that in real life, gas is made out of particles just like a table is made out of particles. We call them atoms, we call them molecules, fine. When we look at the word table, we're not thinking what it's made out of, how many atoms are in a table making up your table. We point and say table, we treat the table if it's made out of a single piece. When we point to gas, it's made out of a single piece. That thing that you see there, whatever it is, that's made out of a single piece. Okay? We point to water, we say water, we're looking at the whole body, the whole shape in front of us. We treat it as if it's made out of a single piece. Okay, so no mereology, and that's what this fellow is saying. Therefore, it is irrational, an irrational question to ask what a fundamental, elementary, right, object is made of, right? And I guess he's referring primarily to the thread, the single thread, and we're saying that the single thread that makes up all matter and all interconnecting ropes is what underlies all objects. The thread is not made of discrete particles. It cannot be made of discrete particles. First of all, because the reporter would say, what's it made out of? And what are you going to say? Well, yeah, it's made out of all these discrete particles. And what is each discrete particle made of? And the thing is, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever forever. No, at some point the buck has to stop. And the buck stops at the elementary fundamental entity. The thread is a fundamental entity. It's not made of anything. It's not made of parts. It is flexible despite that it's not made of parts. It's made out of a single piece. Despite that it is flexible, it has the properties of a river. At the same time, it has the property of a brick wall or a steel beam. Steel beam, for all practical purposes, we say it's made out of a single piece because you can't bend it, okay? And in that sense, the thread is made out of a single piece. At the same time, the thread has the ability to be flexible, which is what a river is, or molasses is, or a string is. And so people say, but how can that be? Because again, you're applying properties of the physical macro world in which we live every day. You're applying it to Mother Nature's elementary, fundamental entity, which is the thread. You can't do that. The thread has a property that matches our macro world, which is like the thread that you use for sewing, or maybe a rubber band, okay? So the thread looks more or less like this. That's what the thread looks like. Now, how complicated was that, okay? And it doesn't stretch like a rubber band because it's made out of a single piece, but it is flexible. Those are the assumptions. The assumptions. The word assumption, those are the assumptions that we apply to the thread in order to understand the theory. Am I getting through to anyone there? Okay, and one fellow says, final question or issue, are there any empirical tests that can be performed to test the rope hypothesis? My God, poor fellow. They have this thing that you got to do experiments. And they go out there and do experiments. And, you know, when I was at AMD, before we could do an experiment, we had to run through the engineering manager because doing experiments costs money. And so you have to justify it. And the way you justify it, you do a design of experiment, something no one does out there, especially NASA doesn't do any design of experiment. What they do is they just run their experiment. So they ran their gravity probe B experiment. They send it out into space and they say, oh, we proved that space is not only warped, but you can rub your shoulder or your elbow against space. That's what they prove with their gyroscopes. Well, before you can do the experiment, it'd be nice if you designed it, meaning make sense of it on the blackboard. And what you got to show is what space is. What is this space-time thingy? Please draw it. If you can't draw it, you can't even run your experiment because you don't have a design of experiment. How can you prove that space pushed your gyroscope if you cannot show what space is? So they're making an assumption, a ridiculous assumption, that space is a physical object, that time is a physical object that you can bend, and they run with that and they say, okay, let's send our probe out there, see if the gyroscope touches time. Oh, great. I mean, please conceptualize it on the board before you send your millions of dollars of probes out there, okay? Anyways, in science, we don't test anything. Sorry, okay? We don't do experiments. In science, we explain them. That's the difference between science and technology. Okay, you can do all the experiments you want in your lab. That's fine. That's technology. So far, all you did is move your hands. When you come back to the office, you have to explain how that happened. Okay? Especially with invisible, intangible mediators that Mother Nature uses. That's what you got to explain. Testing only has to do with persuasion, convincing, converting, recruiting, with belief, with religion. That's what testing and evidence have to do with. Okay? Not with science. Science, we don't empiricize anything. We do no experiments. Physics, we explain mechanisms. We begin with an assumption. Let us assume that light is mediated by what? A pair of twined threads. That's the assumption. Okay? We continue with a theory, explanation. Okay? Light consists of torsions along this DNA-like entity. That's how it works in science. Okay? So this person says test. What are you going to test if you can't touch and you cannot see the rope, the mediator of light? You cannot test because you cannot see or touch the mediator of gravity. What is the use of going to a lab to run an experiment when here's the experiment. That's the only experiment you need. You let go of the pen and it falls to the floor. I mean, did that require an act of Congress or something? I mean, you get the test already. So the question is, if this is the only experiment you need, okay, very expensive experiment, always do it in the presence of a relativist. We have the experiment. We can do it 10 times so it's repeatable. Now explain it. What came in physical contact with a pen? Can you see or touch it? And the answer is no. So going to the lab 10 times is not going to help you. What you need to do is sit back and visualize the mechanism that Mother Nature is using. And if you say that nothing came in contact with a pen, you're introducing black magic, you're introducing spirits. And with that, I'll see you on